Many people say they hate life, that waking up every day is a struggle, that everything seems dull, mechanical, heavy. But what Viktor Frankl discovered amidst the hell of Nazi concentration camps completely challenges this view. The truth may be even more disturbing than it seems. Perhaps you don't hate life. You hate this version of it that you are living. It's easy to blame life for the feelings of anguish, apathy, and discouragement that silently consume millions of people every day. However, Frankl realized something deeply counterintuitive. Even in the most inhumane and ruthless conditions, some individuals found a reason to continue. While others succumbed to despair, there were those who, inexplicably, kept an inner flame alive. It wasn't luck. It wasn't physical strength. It was meaning, purpose, direction. This difference, according to him, was not in the external circumstances. After all, everyone there faced the same horror, but in how each person related to their own existence. Frankl did not find this answer in armchair theories, but in the brutal practice of survival. When everything was stripped away, family, identity, dignity, what remained was a question: why continue living? And the answer, for those who did not have it, was total psychological collapse. But for those who had a why, even the most extreme suffering could be transformed into something bearable, even into something meaningful. This reflection forces us to look more honestly at the diffuse malaise that haunts so many individuals in contemporary society. A sense of emptiness, existential boredom, that nothing really matters. And if this feeling is the muffled cry of a soul suffocated by a life without authenticity, and if what you hate is not the fact of existing, but rather the way you are existing, a routine you did not choose, goals that are not yours, a character you play to fit into a script you never wrote. This video is a deep exploration of what Frankl called the will to meaning, a concept that can not only explain your current suffering but offer a concrete path to overcome it. Because perhaps your problem is not life, but this limited, automated, and empty version of it that you have accepted as normal. And if that is true, then there is something more frightening than hating to live. It is realizing that you have been living far from who you really are. From now on, let's dive into this thesis deeply. Let's understand why meaning is more important than pleasure, why fleeing from pain is a trap, and how life can cease to be a burden, not when everything changes, but when you start to live with purpose. Viktor Frankl was not just a prisoner, he was a psychiatrist, someone trained to observe human behavior with surgical precision. And that is exactly what he did while losing everything: his home, his freedom, his family. In the concentration camps, where life was reduced to its most raw and primitive state, he not only survived, he studied what made some men stand while others crumbled in the face of the same terror. What Frankl witnessed was not just pain, but a devastating psychological truth. The prisoners, subjected to hunger, humiliation, and the constant threat of death, were all, theoretically, equal in suffering. But not everyone reacted the same way. Some went insane, others gave up, many took their own lives. And yet there were those who maintained hope, who gave their last piece of bread to a weaker companion, who comforted others even as they were about to die. What sustained these people? Frankl began to realize that there was something more powerful than the instinct for survival, what he called the will to meaning. Those who had a reason, an internal reason to keep going, endured the unbearable. A father dreaming of reuniting with his son. A writer who still wanted to finish his book. A man who refused to die without turning his suffering into something greater. Frankl understood that the key was not in avoiding suffering, but in giving it purpose. And this realization was not just theoretical. In his own account, he states that, in the darkest moments, what kept him alive was imagining himself giving lectures in the future, explaining to the world what he had learned in that hell. He did not know if he would survive, but that imagined purpose, that projected meaning, served as an anchor amid the chaos. Suffering, when connected to meaning, ceased to be mere destruction. It became transformation. This vision violently contrasts with modern thinking, which seeks to avoid any discomfort, anesthetize any pain, eliminate all suffering. But what Frankl discovered in extreme conditions was exactly the opposite. When we cannot change our circumstances, the only freedom left to us, and perhaps the most powerful of all, is the freedom to choose our attitude toward pain. And it is here that the message becomes universal. Because although you may not be in a concentration camp, you may be trapped in a life that feels meaningless. You may feel that you are merely surviving, that your days pass without purpose, that your actions do not reflect who you truly are. Frankl forces us to confront this reality with brutal honesty. The absence of meaning is as destructive as any physical suffering. But if suffering can be transformed into meaning, how do we reach that point? How do we find meaning amid the emptiness of modern life? Frankl left us a clear answer. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next part. The 3 concrete paths he identified to find real purpose, even in the most difficult circumstances. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. We live in the era of comfort. We have immediate access to food, entertainment, distraction, digital dopamine, and social validation. It has never been easier to escape boredom, pain, and inner silence. And yet, we have never been so lost. We have never been so empty. The paradox of modernity is cruel. The more we try to escape suffering, the deeper we plunge into a meaningless life. Viktor Frankl called this existential vacuum, a peculiar type of suffering of the modern age. It is not about clinical depression or explicit traumas. It is about that silent, subtle, yet persistent feeling that something is missing. People who, on paper, have everything to be happy, health, money, stability, even freedom, but feel an internal void that nothing seems to fill. They wake up without enthusiasm, live on autopilot, and at night anesthetize themselves with social media, series, alcohol, or any other distraction that can prevent them from confronting their own soul. Frankl saw this phenomenon as a direct result of a society that replaced meaning with the relentless pursuit of pleasure. A society that taught its children to chase status, security, and performance, but never taught them to stop and ask, "Why am I doing this? Does this have to do with me or with what others expect from me?" Most people do not live. They play a role. They follow careers they did not choose, maintain relationships based on social conventions, pursue goals that do not represent their true values. And when the void finally catches up with them, they try to remedy it with more consumption, more distraction, more movement. But meaning is not something that can be bought. It is something that must be built. And building requires confrontation. It requires silence. It requires courage. Modernity traded meaning for comfort. But comfort without purpose is anesthesia. It is not life. It is a numbing zone where the soul slowly rots without screaming. What Frankl shows us is that suffering is not the true enemy. The void is, because it corrodes from within. It slowly destroys. It makes an entire life pass by without the person ever having asked themselves if they were truly living their truth or just following someone else's script. But there is a way out. Frankl not only identified the problem, he outlined the paths. 3 concrete ways to find meaning, even in chaos, even in suffering, even in an existence that seems stagnant. These paths are not promises of immediate happiness. They are invitations to authenticity. And that is exactly what we will reveal next. How to transform your life from the one element that no one can take away from you, your purpose. For Viktor Frankl, meaning is not a philosophical luxury. It is a psychological necessity, as vital as water or food. When it is lacking, the mind becomes ill, the soul withers, and life loses its internal structure. But contrary to what many think, meaning is not something that is found ready-made. It is constructed. According to Frankl, there are three fundamental paths through which human beings can shape and deepen their existence, even in the face of suffering, doubt, or chaos. The first path is through creation, what you do, build, or offer to the world. It can be a work of art, a professional project, a gesture of contribution, or even an act of courage. When we put our energy into something that transcends mere pleasure and connects with a greater value, we experience the profound feeling that we are leaving a mark. This gives us direction. It means transforming your actions into expressions of your essence. It is not about productivity. It is about authenticity. Creating something with purpose is often the first step to breaking free from stagnation and reconnecting with life. The second path is through experience, what we live deeply, the love for another person, the contemplation of beauty, a genuine connection with the world or with nature. Frankl speaks of the ability to be present, to dive fully into a moment that reveals something essential to us. It is not about hedonism, but about presence and vulnerability. Loving someone deeply, for example, can give meaning to one's own existence, even in the worst circumstances. True experiences take us out of the center of the ego and connect us with something greater. But it is the third path that most challenges our contemporary culture, the attitude towards inevitable suffering. When we cannot change reality, we can still change the way we position ourselves in relation to it. Frankl saw this radically in the concentration camps. Men who, even stripped of everything, maintained dignity in their gestures. Suffering with purpose transforms pain into transcendence. It is not about romanticizing suffering, but about not wasting it. When you choose a courageous stance in the face of pain, you reframe it. Tragedy becomes a fertile ground for inner revelation. These three paths, creating, experiencing, and transforming, are not magic formulas. They are invitations. Invitations to move beyond the surface and enter the more risky and true territory of existence, living with purpose. And purpose does not come from what others expect of you, but from what your own being silently cries out when you are alone. And here we reach a crossroads. If meaning is possible even in the worst circumstances, why do so many people continue to live versions of life that destroy them from within? Why do we insist on anesthetizing the void instead of facing it? The answer may lie in how we have been conditioned to flee from pain and seek immediate comfort. And this trap, this diversion, is what we will explore in the next part. Why the search for relief has become the greatest obstacle to finding real meaning. Most people who feel lost are not looking for meaning. They are looking for relief. A breath. A moment of forgetfulness. They do not want to understand why they suffer, nor confront the roots of the emptiness they feel. They just want it to pass, to hurt less, to stop, even if just for a few hours. That's why emotional anesthetics like social media, pornography, overeating, unmonitored medication, binge-watching series, and alcohol are so popular. They do not heal, but they numb. And for a suffocated soul, numbness feels like relief. It feels like peace. But Viktor Frankl was clear. Relief is not transformation. And seeking comfort without facing the origin of suffering is like trying to put out a fire by spraying perfume in the air. It may mask it for a while, but the flames keep burning inside. Pain does not disappear when ignored. It transforms into symptoms, into apathy, into insomnia, into constant irritation, into the feeling that life is passing by without you being a part of it. And here lies the fatal mistake. believing that the problem is the pain, when in fact the problem is the disconnection. Pain is part of the human experience. Running away from it is to deny the very condition of being alive. But when pain arises from emptiness, from lack of meaning, it becomes unbearable precisely because it seems purposeless. We are not prepared to suffer without reason, and that is exactly where courage comes in. Frankl teaches us that there is only one real path to overcoming: facing pain head-on, listening to it, interpreting it as a sign that we are living a life that does not belong to us. When we feel aversion to what we live, when routine consumes us, when anxiety becomes constant, it is usually not life that is wrong. It is the way we are inhabiting that life. It is the daily betrayal of our own soul. True healing is not in fleeing, nor in distracting ourselves, nor in pretending that everything is fine. It is in facing discomfort with brutal honesty and asking, what in me is being silenced? What am I denying? What part of me am I killing every day to fit into an existence that no longer represents me? This question is powerful and dangerous, because once asked, it begins to corrode everything that is false, everything that is a mask, everything that was built just to please or to fit in. But it is also the only question that can return us to freedom, because it forces us to recognize that perhaps we do not hate life itself. We hate the version of it that we chose to live in order to survive. And this leads us to the core of Frankl's thesis. It is not life that needs to change. It is the way we live. Transformation happens when we stop seeking easy exits and start building a life anchored in authenticity, values, and purpose. And this requires something that few are willing to do: courage. Courage to stop lying to oneself. Courage to abandon what is comfortable but empty. Courage to start from scratch if necessary. Courage to listen to the soul when it screams that something is wrong. In the next part, we will explore exactly this idea: the moment of rupture, the definitive question that can redefine your existence. If I were living authentically, would this life really be unbearable? Perhaps you do not need a different life. Perhaps you just need to start living your own. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. There is a question capable of breaking the illusion that sustains a lifetime lived on autopilot. A simple yet devastating question. A question that, when asked sincerely, no longer allows a return to comfortable ignorance. If I were living authentically, with purpose, and aligned with my truth, would this life still be unbearable? This is the question that Viktor Frankl leaves echoing in the subtext of his work. Because deep down, we do not hate life. We hate the silent betrayal we commit against ourselves every day. We hate the soulless days that repeat. We hate empty conversations, meaningless jobs, relationships based on convenience, dreams that are not ours. We hate the act of wearing a borrowed identity to fit into structures that suffocate everything we hold most true. Many believe they need an external revolution. A new job, a new country, a new relationship, a new body, a new beginning. But these changes, in themselves, are useless if you continue carrying the fragmented and dishonest version of yourself into them. Changing the scenery without changing the protagonist only prolongs the same play, with different costumes. Frankl challenges us to stop looking for exits and start seeking depth. And depth requires confrontation. Confrontation with the fact that perhaps you have spent years building a life that pleases others but makes you sick. A life made of empty achievements, well-curated appearances, and safe routines, but devoid of soul. And when you realize this, everything begins to crumble. But this collapse is not the end. It is the beginning of reconstruction. The true turning point happens when you realize that you do not need to destroy everything around you to start over. You do need to destroy the lies that sustain the way you live. You need to question the shoulds that were taught to you. You should be stable, successful, sociable, pleasant, productive, normal. But what if all of this is a theater? What if living a normal life is killing you inside? This question is not comfortable. It demands brutality with oneself. But it also offers a gift that few receive, the chance to wake up from the trance, the chance to start living for real. When you stop trying to survive within the prison you built and start listening to what your soul truly wants, the bars begin to rust. It is at this moment that many people realize that the problem was never the world, nor time, nor others. The problem was being disconnected from oneself, and the solution is not to flee from life, but to reclaim your own essence. Frankl shows that you can be surrounded by suffering and still find meaning. Because what truly matters are not the circumstances, but the connection between your existence and an authentic purpose. A why that makes sense to you and only to you. But what if you don't know what that purpose is? What if everything seems confusing, distant, or unattainable? This is where the most important part of this journey begins. Stop looking for ready-made formulas and start listening to the inner call. In the next and final part, we will talk about how to initiate this change, how to step out of the false version of your life and begin, with brutal courage, to live your truth. Because perhaps you do not need to change your life. Perhaps you just need to live your life differently, and that changes everything. The harshest truth that Viktor Frankl delivers to us does not come in the form of consolation, but of responsibility. He does not say that everything will get better, nor that suffering will disappear if you think positively. On the contrary, he shows that the pain, emptiness, and anguish you feel may be the clearest signs that you are living a distorted version of yourself, and that this only changes when you have the courage to look at yourself with brutal honesty. Most people live trying to escape from discomfort, doubts, the internal pressure to be something more. They drown in distractions, seek external solutions, hope that something will change on the outside. But real change, deep transformation, does not happen when the world changes. It happens when you decide to stop betraying yourself. You do not need a new life. You need a new way of being in your life. You need to stop living to meet expectations, to please ghosts, to achieve goals that were never yours. You need to start listening to what your soul is saying when you feel that knot in your chest, that nausea from routine, that discomfort you try to silence with busyness and excuses. This discomfort is your calling. It is saying, this is not you. This has never been you. Frankl saw men die without ever having truly lived, and he saw men survive hell because they had something inside them that neither hatred nor hunger nor death could extinguish. A purpose. A why. Something that made existence bearable, even when the world around was unbearable. You have that power too. The difference is that it may be buried under years of obedience, fear, and distraction. And it will only be freed when you stop seeking formulas and start sincerely asking yourself, what am I doing with my one and only life? This is not a question that can be answered immediately, but it is a question that changes everything, that tears off the mask, that demands action. From here on, the choice is yours. You can continue living a comfortable and empty version of life, or you can begin to tread the more difficult but infinitely truer path of living aligned with who you are. And if you have made it this far, it is because something inside you is already awakening. So don't stop now. If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, I choose to live with purpose. I want to see how many of you are ready to step out of autopilot and take control of your own existence. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video now. It could be the first step to changing a life. And before you go, don't forget to watch the next video. It is just as important as this one. This journey is just beginning, and every part of it is essential for you to understand what is really holding you back. See you there.